This is day number 6 of the 30-day solo podcast challenge. My name is David Hooper, the website bigpodcast.com, and my job is to help you grow a big audience for your message. The way we are doing that right now is via podcasting, specifically how you approach your podcast. I'm helping you to clarify your message. That's the number one thing you can do to attract and build a great audience. I'm helping you to improve your delivery. They're going to call you the postman when I get done with you. Rain, sun, sleet, snow. You're going to deliver. You're going to have that clear message that goes straight into the ears of your listeners, turning them into customers, turning them into clients, and resulting in more money for you. Solo podcasting puts you out front, and that is one of the reasons it should be a priority for any podcaster. So let's get going. If you haven't done this already, I want you to listen to the intro episode first. This explains everything, the what and the why, everything that we're doing here. And to get that, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Not only will you get the intro episode, you're going to get the entire series, all 30 days. I'm going to walk you through everything step by step, make it painless for you. So go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe and make sure you don't miss anything. Previously, we talked about describing the problem that your listeners face and how to solve it. On this episode, the focus is misinformation. Your listeners aren't just listening to you. They're getting information from a lot of places. A lot of that information is wrong. Here's the question for you to answer. What is something where you recommend the opposite of what everybody else recommends? Or what is something that you do the opposite of what everybody else does? This is a great way not only to explain what it is that you do and your philosophy and how you are different from everybody else to your listeners. It's a great way to make yourself stand out from everybody else in your category, everybody else in your niche. That's why this is important. Let me give you an example. When it comes to podcasting, most people think that bigger is better. I know this is weird coming from a guy with a company named Big Podcast, but bigger is not always better. As a podcaster, what you want to be is effective. You want to reach the right people with your message, not just a ton of people. Sometimes that means going smaller, especially when it comes to the focus of your podcast or the focus of what it is that you do. Let me give you a story. When I started Music Business Radio, and I've told you that story throughout this series, I talked about the pitch meeting, how I walked into the radio station, what it took for me to get on the air. And the original thought by the station management was that Music Business Radio, my show, would be something that we would blast all throughout the country, and it would be a general interest program. The original thought was that the advertisers we were going to go for would be big national brands, Coca-Cola, Ford, insurance companies, big brands that you hear on every national network. And I get why that makes sense. You think that you've got a big audience. Why not go for the big general interest brands? Those are the guys with the money. Except we didn't have a big general interest show. I mean, yeah, we were going to be on in New York, Boston, Austin, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago, Atlanta, Memphis, some of the bigger urban areas where there were a lot of musicians. But we weren't necessarily for everybody in those areas. We were for the musicians. My suggestion was to forget these big brands. Let's focus on a listening audience that's just musicians, not necessarily everybody. Really dive deep into the content that we release, really attract the people that we want. And because of that, go for smaller companies who can't advertise everywhere else because they don't have the budget, yet they have a need to reach this very specific audience of musicians. The result is that we make more money per listener and more money overall. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you yet, it will. On tomorrow's episode of the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge, I'm going to explain how this works. This is also a technique that you can use for your podcast. You're going to walk away with more money because of it. It's actually an easier sell to get these smaller companies on board. And the content that you have, that's going to make it even more powerful. You'll have more dedicated listeners. That's tomorrow on the next episode of the 30-Day Solo Podcast Challenge. Let's get to your action step for this episode. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab a piece of paper, grab a pen. I want you to outline your episode with 3 things. Consider the beginning, the middle, and the end. We want a linear story. Take people through the process of what has happened. The intro Here's what it's going to be. Here's what most people think. I want you to reference the problem that you mentioned yesterday. Basically, what you're saying is, this is understood to be correct. The meat, that's when you're going to get into, this is what the truth is, and then you're going to explain it. So everybody else says zig, you say zag, and that meat, that is why you are doing the opposite, the zag, of what everybody else is doing. That is when you say, this is what the truth is, and here is why it is the truth. You're going to wrap it up. As always, bonus if you give an action step. The action step from the example I gave, narrowing the focus. If I wanted to give you an action step on that, I would say you narrow your focus. And I'm going to continue that story tomorrow on day 7 of the 30-day solo podcast challenge. I want you to remember this as you're going through this linear action that I'm asking you to do. Stories are important, so add stories where you can. Personal stories are best. Keep your outline short and tight. Don't overthink it. Just 3 to 5 minutes. Come up with an outline. Hit record. Go for it. Upload it. Send it to me. The way to reach out to me, bigpodcast.com. You can also reach me via Twitter, @DavidHooper is how to do that. That's it for today. Now remember, this episode, day number 6 that we're on, it continues with day number 7. So I want you to make sure that you do this and do it right now before you hit record, before you forget. Go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Subscribe to this podcast. That way you won't miss tomorrow. You won't miss the rest of this series. I've made it easy on you. However you're listening to your podcast now, iPhone, Android, you're on a computer using RSS, I've got those buttons for you. I've got an Android button, an iPhone button, an RSS button. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. You're going to click on one of those buttons. Bam, you're subscribed. And while you were there, I got something else for you. I've got a free podcast toolkit. I've got episode templates, social media templates. If you use music and you want to have music licensing that's legal, I've got a contract that you can get signed from the people whose music you're using. That's all there at bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening. Remember, the next part of this is going to be on day 7. So I will see you tomorrow for day 7 of the 30-day solo podcast challenge. See you then.